Light a deep. Hello everyone, wishing you all good health and peace in life. Ironically, as I send these wishes out into the world, my own body grows weaker with each passing day. Like petals falling from a once blooming flower, to Diep is fading, quietly, painfully. Somewhere out there, James is still searching for her, his heart echoing with regret and love too long unspoken. But time is not merciful. Will he find her before it's too late? Or will love arrive only to touch fingers already cold? The wind howled through the empty fields, brushing past the rusted gate of a small, lonely house at the edge of the village. Inside, Diep lay on a thin mattress, her skin pale, her breaths shallow. Every movement sent a sharp pain through her chest. She clutched her stomach, now visibly swollen with the life growing inside her, and whispered James's name into the silence. She had been hiding from him, not out of hate, but fear of the truth. Fear of what he might say when he learned she was pregnant. Even though they had never been truly intimate, the doctors had confirmed it. A rare condition, a medical mystery, but real. And now, her health was spiraling, her strength fading with each passing hour. James, the powerful CEO once buried in business rivalries and betrayals, had sensed something was wrong. He had returned to Diep's home, only to find it empty, the scent of boiled herbs still lingering in the air. Her neighbors spoke in hushed tones of how she had collapsed days ago while tending to her garden, and how a stranger had helped her inside before disappearing. Panic gripped his chest like a vice. He remembered how she used to smile at him while selling vegetables at the market. How she nursed him back to health when he faked an illness just to gather proof against John, the man who had tried to destroy him. Through every fall, every betrayal, she was there, gentle, grounded, and full of light. And now she was vanishing. James drove across muddy roads, his shoes caked with earth as he searched from one clinic to another. He called in every contact, pulled every string. But time was slipping through his fingers, and so was she. In a small rural clinic tucked behind a bamboo grove, a nurse finally whispered his name. She's here, but barely holding on. When James stepped into the room, his heart shattered. Diep, the girl who had faced storms for him, lay unconscious, her body fragile like paper. The monitor beside her beeped in slow, irregular rhythms. He knelt beside her, tears threatening to fall. "I'm here now," he whispered. "I won't leave you again." And as if pulled back by the sound of his voice, Diep stirred faintly. Her lips parted, eyes fluttering open just enough to see the man she had loved, still standing by her side. Would he save her? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, James had found her, and he would never let go again. The hospital lights flickered faintly as night fell. James sat by Diep's bedside, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. The doctors had done what they could, stabilizing her for now, but the cause of her rapid decline was still a mystery. Her blood work was erratic, her vitals unstable. And yet, through it all, she had clung to life. For him, James leaned back in the chair, his mind racing with memories. The day he had first seen her laughing under the mango tree, her hands stained with soil from the field. The way she had looked at him, not like a powerful CEO, not like a man with money, but just him. That simple trust had undone him. "I should have stayed," he whispered, his voice hoarse with regret. "I should have protected you from everything." His phone buzzed. It was Tuan, his most loyal employee, the only one he could trust now. "James, we found something." About her condition, and about John. James's blood turned cold. He stepped outside the room, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Tuan's voice was low. "John knew she was pregnant. He found out before you did. He bribed a doctor to misdiagnose her, gave her medication that slowly drained her health. She wasn't just sick, she was being poisoned." James staggered against the wall, that son of a. "There's more," Toon said grimly. "John wanted to make sure you'd suffer. Taking your company wasn't enough. He wanted you to lose her. The hallway spun for a moment before James composed himself. This wasn't over. Inside the room, Diep stirred again. Her fingers reached toward the small notebook on her bedside table, a journal she had kept hidden. James picked it up, gently flipping through the pages. In delicate handwriting, she had written, "If I don't make it, tell James I never stopped believing in him. I don't care about the company, the past, the land. I only wanted to see him smile again. To believe in love again." James felt his chest tighten. No empire, no revenge was worth more than this woman. The next morning, he made a decision. He called the hospital director and arranged for Diep to be transferred to a private facility in the city, where the best doctors would uncover the truth and save her, no matter the cost. Then, he called his lawyers. "Reopen the case," he ordered. "I want John brought in. For everything, the poisoning, the false investment withdrawals, and attempted murder." As Diep lay quietly in the ambulance, her fragile hand in his, James whispered, "I'm not just going to save you. I'm going to rebuild everything, but this time with you." And as the ambulance rolled away from the village and into the rising sun, a single tear slipped from her eye. She heard him, and she was coming back. The ambulance hummed softly as it sped through winding roads, leaving the countryside behind. James never let go of Diep's hand. Her pulse was faint, but steady, a quiet rhythm of hope fighting against the darkness. In the private hospital in the city, the best doctors in internal medicine, toxicology, and prenatal care were already waiting. Within hours, a team of specialists gathered around her. James paced outside the glass walls, watching them work, his jaw clenched. Every second felt like a century. Later that evening, a doctor approached him. She was calm, but her eyes were filled with weight. "We've identified traces of a rare immunosuppressive compound in her blood," she said. The dosage was small, but continuous. It was designed to mimic natural illness. Whoever gave this to her knew exactly what they were doing. James's hands tightened into fists. "Can you save her?" The doctor nodded. "Yes, but we have to act fast. She's weak, and she's pregnant. The baby is stable, but any further delay could have been fatal." James felt like the air had returned to his lungs. He went back to Diep's side. Machines beeped softly beside her. She hadn't woken yet, but her breathing had deepened. Her skin was warmer now. And James, for the first time in days, let out a long breath. But peace would not last long. Across the city, in a high-rise office cloaked in shadows, John stood by the window, swirling a glass of red wine. His eyes narrowed as he stared out into the night. He had heard. James had found her. The plan was falling apart. "Damn it," he hissed. She wasn't supposed to survive. His assistant, a nervous man with a thin frame, entered the room. "Sir, our contact in the hospital says they've isolated the compound. If they link it to your signature shipments." "They won't," John snapped. "Erase everything. Burn the records. Pay off anyone necessary. But what if James goes public?" John turned, his face calm but dangerous. "Then we end this, once and for all." Back in the hospital, James sat by Diep's bed, reading aloud from her journal. Not the painful entries, but the hopeful ones. The day they planted tomatoes together, her first ride on his motorbike, the night she whispered she loved him beneath a rain-soaked tree. And then, her fingers moved. Her lips parted. "James," she whispered. His heart nearly burst. "I'm here," he said, rushing to her side. "I'm right here, Diep." Her eyes fluttered open, weak, but aware. "You found me." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Always. No matter what it takes." She gave him the faintest smile. "I knew you would." And then her hand moved to her stomach. "The baby?" James covered her hand with his own. "Safe, and so are you." But just as the moment warmed the room, a loud knock broke the silence. It was Toon, breathless, holding a manila folder. "We got it," he said. The proof: shipping logs, pharmacy invoices, and security footage showing John's driver making the delivery. James took the folder, his eyes narrowing. Then it's time to end this. He turned back to Diep and kissed her forehead. You rest now, I have something to finish. She smiled faintly. Be careful. James stood tall, a fire burning in his chest. I'm not just fighting for justice anymore, he said. I'm fighting for our future. The sun hadn't yet risen, but James was already dressed in a tailored black suit, the manila folder of evidence tucked beneath his arm like a weapon. His eyes, once warm and gentle, now burned with cold determination. In his heart, he wasn't just a CEO. He was a man on a mission, a man whose family had been poisoned, whose company had been nearly destroyed, and whose love had nearly slipped away. In the hospital room, Diep lay resting. Though still pale, her breathing was even now. She had whispered something before she drifted back to sleep. Don't let him hurt anyone else. James kissed her forehead one last time, then turned toward the door. Outside, Tuan was already waiting in the hallway. The press conference is set for 10 a.m. The legal team has reviewed everything: the invoices, the lab results, the surveillance video. There's no way John walks away from this. James nodded. He's hidden behind shadows long enough. At 10 a.m., dozens of reporters filled the sleek, glass-walled lobby of James's headquarters, once nearly abandoned, now buzzing with anticipation. Cameras flashed, microphones rose like a forest of metal limbs. James stood at the podium, calm, commanding. His voice echoed through the room. I want to speak not just as a CEO, but as a son, a partner, and a citizen of this country. He paused, locking eyes with every camera. Over the past year, my company and my loved ones have been the targets of a calculated attack. Today, I present undeniable evidence that Mr. John Law, former investor and former board member, orchestrated a deliberate effort to poison Diep, sabotage my company's operations, and manipulate agricultural development funds. Gasps filled the room as James laid out the documents, displaying them on screens behind him. This isn't just about business. This is about human life. This is about truth. And with that, he stepped aside, allowing his legal team to hand the full dossier to two uniformed officers waiting nearby. Meanwhile, in his sleek penthouse, John was watching the live broadcast, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he poured himself a drink. The walls around him felt tighter, the air heavier. His assistant burst in. Sir, the police are here. John didn't flinch. He stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and gave one last glance at the city skyline. Tell them I'll see them in court. Back at the hospital, Diep stirred again. She turned her head slowly to find a small envelope beside her bed, James's handwriting on the front. When you wake up, with trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a photograph of a small country house, surrounded by green fields and white blossoms. On the back, he had written, for you and the little one. A place to heal, a place to begin again. I'll be waiting for you there, after the storm. James, tears slipped down her cheeks. Not of sorrow, but of something stronger, something brighter. Life lesson: love, truth, and resilience. In life, we often face storms, betrayal, illness, loss, and heartbreak. But what truly defines us is not the pain we endure, but the strength we find within ourselves and the people who stand beside us. Diep's journey shows us that even in our weakest moments, love can be a powerful source of healing. Her quiet courage and James's unwavering loyalty teach us that when two people trust and fight for each other, even the darkest days can end in light.